Mikael Pyyhtia's got a new contract. Let's break it down on this bonus Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Just a quick bonus episode today, or another episode, I guess, since we had one come out this morning, the middle part of the Top 25 Under 25 series, which I'm really having a lot of fun with. Hopefully you guys are enjoying that as well. Mikael Pyyhtia has a new contract, which is about right. You know, it's a real mid-August news announcement, right? Pyyhtia RFA has signed a 1-year, 2-way contract for, I believe it is $775K in the NHL, $100K in the AHL, and he's guaranteed at least $140K. So, not a bad bit of business for a guy that was a real kind of tweener player for the Blue Jackets of the Monsters this year, right? He played 47 games with the Blue Jackets, had 7 points in those 47 games, and then had 16 points in 28 games with the Cleveland Monsters as well. Mikael Pyyhtia is a really interesting player because, like, on the surface, I feel like he was a guy that had AHL middle six lifer written all over him, right? Former 4th-round pick, came over to North America a couple of seasons ago, after a couple of solid years in the Liga in Finland, and just kind of showed up and has very kind of quietly been a pretty good AHL forward and a reasonable replacement level NHL player as well. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mikael Pyyhtia is going to be, a top 6 forward for this team. Although he did spend some time in the top 6 this season, because of course he did. The Blue Jackets used him in all kinds of different situations. Honestly, probably a bottom 6 guy. One of the things he was known for in Finland was his shot, his ability to shoot the puck. He didn't really shoot the puck with the Blue Jackets this year, so that's something that he needs to work on, I think. But even so, I don't know if there's an NHL, a full-time NHL player there. He feels like a great guy that you kind of have around just in case, right? And this contract kind of reflects that as well, right? It's again, a 2-way contract does not mean that you can play in both the NHL and the AHL, which is a common misconception. It just means that you get paid a different amount, whether you are in the NHL or the AHL, right? And that's what I mean by he's getting paid $775K in the NHL and $100K in the AHL. That doesn't mean he's getting $885K all over. It just means that is his yearly salary. So if he spends all year in the NHL, he'll get all $775K, right? If he doesn't get a call up at all, then I believe he's guaranteed. What did I say? Guaranteed $140K, which I don't know if that's that he's guaranteed a certain number of call ups to make that extra $40K on top of the $100K that he's guaranteed as part of his AHL salary. But basically, he is a guy that they expect to, in my opinion anyway, a guy that they expect to mostly be in the AHL and be willing and able to be called up if they need him to be, right? He's not quite a guy that they expect to be in the NHL, in a similar-ish kind of projection, I guess, is obviously different positions, but Jake Christensen is, I believe, on a 1-year contract right now, or excuse me, a 2-year contract right now. But it is, I believe, a 1-way contract as opposed to last year's contract, which would have been a 2-way contract. He finally established himself as a full-time NHLer. I'm just pulling up Jay Christensen's contract just to convince myself that I am correct. He has signed a so last year it was a 2-way contract, 1-year 2-way contract, very similar to what Pyyhtia has signed literally an hour and a half ago. he then followed that up, again, a very solid year as a full-time NHLer, with a 2-year contract extension that kicks in this coming summer, with a 2-year extension, which is a one-way. So he's getting paid the same amount of money whether he's in the minors or the NHL. That has to be the goal for Pyyhtia, right? Like, the goal for him this year, I think, is it's not the same kind of show me contract as like Ken Johnson's contract, for example. It's very much you were fine last year. Let's, can you do it again this year? And if you can, then we'll reevaluate. But I like his contract for Pyyhtia a lot. I think it's basically bang on where it's supposed to be. Doesn't move the needle, right? It's not an exciting contract. Pyyhtia's not a particularly like exciting player. No offense to Mikael Pyyhtia, who again is a player that I like a lot. This is a very, very standard contract that hopefully he's going to be able to build off of. There are holes in the Blue Jackets lineup. I don't know if there's a hole specifically for Pyyhtia at the minute. There's a lot of question marks about like who's the fourth line going to be. What's the bottom six going to look like? I don't think there's a hole specifically for Pyyhtia, but there's definitely an opportunity for him there, right? Similarly to Luka Del Barbaloos, I feel like there's an opportunity for him as well to be in that bottom six. And so this to me is them saying, hey, you had a decent year last year. Let's see if you can do it again this year, and we'll talk again next summer and see if we can't get you on a one-way contract. So again, I like this a lot. I like Pyyhtia a lot as a player. Don't think he moves the needle, but is going to be, for my money anyway, he's probably going to be one of the better monsters this year, and might get an amount of NHL time again. He feels like he's at the top of the list for injury call-up, right? Can play in the middle six, probably shouldn't play on the second line, but like if he played on the second line last year because of, partially because of injuries and partially because they didn't know who to put with Adam Fantilli, but like he's shown that he is at least capable of keeping up on that second line. Not like excelling, not really he didn't look out of place on the second line, but he didn't really look in place either, right? Like he was definitely struggling to keep up, but he was still managing to keep up for the most part, if not ever really looking at home on that second line. He was a guy that can play up the lineup if you need him to. You probably shouldn't need him to. Like, it feels like if you need him to be on the second line, then something's gone really wrong somewhere else, right? But a guy that has versatility, if he figures out that shot, then they might start, if the goals start going in for him, then, that's a third line player. If not, probably a fourth line player. Mikael Pyyhtia also, just to kind of finish and wrap up here, 24th overall on the Blue Jackets, top 25, or the Locked On Blue Jackets, I should say. Top 25 players under the age of 25. Still very young. I believe is 22 or 23. Turns 24 in December. So still a very young player. Was drafted in the 2020 draft. And like has just kind of worked really hard to get where he is. Like when he was drafted, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a fun guy for the Monsters. Didn't ever see him as an NHL option. And then this year he really worked really hard to be an NHL option. So, good for him. And if he keeps working, if he comes in and has a strong training camp, he might be that bottom six winger that the Blue Jackets don't really have written out yet. Like there's a world in which he beats Miles Wood out for a job, right? Which would be great for Pyyhtia. I don't know how likely it is, but like that's, to me, that's the goal, right? Is to get to training camp and take a job away from someone like a Miles Wood, who is going to be on the roster, but possibly shouldn't be playing every single night or, at all, depending on who you listen to. So that to me is, that's the goal for Pyyhtia. The goal is to be an NHL player full time. I don't know if he hits that goal this year, but there's definitely room in the lineup for him to be a tweener, which good for him. And again, this contract doesn't really move the needle, but it's not supposed to. So I think it is a perfectly cromulent contract for a perfectly cromulent young player. That's it. That's my quick thoughts on this contract. It's an easy passing grade, right? How to screw up this contract, unless you want to give him 8 years at 3 million or whatever it is just to do it. Like it is a contract for a roster spot, right? And I'm fine with that. No episode tomorrow. We'll be back with you on Friday for the. I was thinking it was going to be the final part of the top 25 under 25 series, but having looked at who is left and how much I want to talk about them, there might be 2 episodes on Friday, or a Friday episode and a Saturday episode or something like that, because I don't think I'm going to be able to fit all 10 plays that I want to talk about into the 30-ish minutes that I have to talk about them. So keep your eyes out for that. But we're going to be doing the next part of the top 25 under 25 on Friday either way. Thank you for listening to this bonus episode. Thank you for making it hopefully your second listen of the day after this morning's episode was your first listen of the day. You can find me on Blue Sky at JKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets on Twitter and LO-Blue Jackets over on Blue Sky. Thank you once again for listening. And until Friday, make sure you stay locked on.